All right, let's do this. I don't know if I'm going to do anything tomorrow unless I come up with something, but it's Friday. This is where I kind of get the last of my roster moves done based off of injury reports. I'm usually pulling my kicker sometime between tonight and tomorrow. So I bet some of you have some questions about what's going on. We'll go over some of the news and other stuff. So anyway, I'll make this long and short. I'll try and limit my philosophical stuff. But anyway, like the human brain is designed to see patterns. Like that's why we're so good at what we do. We're going to see them when they're there and when they're not. Like so, week 3 in fantasy is important because this is the first time we get to actually see patterns. Instead of just like perceiving like a 1 or 2 game sample size. So again, trust your process that got you to the point where you have a lineup. Because if we start making roster moves and lineup moves before week 4, we're basically just jumping at shadows, what we think is there. We're creating patterns where there is none. Now, this is kind of funny because like as I was prepping for this, like Jake Browning may start for the Bengals. That's who's up on the screen, Jake Browning. And Gardner Minshew is going to start for the good old Colts. My boy Gardner Minshew. And they actually played each other in 2018 in the Apple Cup. And there's a little bit of a story behind this for those that are worried about the Bengals and Joe Burrow. So Jake Browning may be good at football if he starts on Monday night. Like I remember watching Jake Browning in the California State Championship game in like 2014. I was watching because he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And one of the dirtiest plays I've ever saw. Dirty from a coaching standpoint that Folsom Browning School late in the fourth quarter when they were beating whoever they were playing, they called a 5-step drop at a high school game and they were up by like 2 scores just to kind of rub it in the other team's nose that they weren't good at football. So they let Jake Browning do his 5-step drop, hit a deep crosser, and they had the offensive tackle like kick setting for a 5-step drop. This is pretty complicated things to do at a high school level. And it's because like how Folsom has their program set up, like they're feeding all the way up from like Pop Warner to do these activities. So like they don't need to do them. They have to actually do them in the regular season, but they were playing such a weaker opponent in the championship game. They were just like we've been playing with our food the entire time. And that's Jake Browning, which is interesting because in 2016, he was like the Pac-10 offensive player of the year. He had, I have it pulled up here if you're wondering, he had 43 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He probably was like in the ballpark of being like the number 1 overall pick in the NFL. And then he had 2 middling seasons after that. So he started all 4 years and he just kind of fell off the map and went undrafted. And he's been bouncing around the league since then. He beat out Trevor Siemian to be the backup for the Bengals. And what's interesting about this is Trevor Siemian is a low-end starting tier NFL quarterback if necessary. He's an emergency guy, kind of like Andy Dalton is. We'll get to Andy Dalton. And we've seen with the maturation of a guy like Geno Smith that guys can get better at football. So what was ever going on there in Washington where Jake Browning not only didn't turn the corner, he kind of regressed. Well, now Jake Browning is beat out a guy who started in the NFL to be the backup quarterback for Joe Burrow and one of the best offenses in the NFL. So why does this matter to you other than the fact that, Gardner Minshew starting and Jake Browning is starting in the same game or same weekend? And by the way, one of my co-managers said, absolutely not. We're not starting Gardner Minshew. Shut up. You're not being cute because we have, Richardson. He's like, play somebody else. No. So anyway, the reason behind this is it may not even be a question if Jake Browning's kind of good at football. I kind of think he is. I've been watching him since he was a senior in high school. It's the fact that if you put a guy that's at least competent around the weapons that the Bengals have, does that from a fantasy perspective allow the Bengals weapons to be functional in a game that is projected to be, would have been projected to be a shootout if it was Burrow versus Stafford? That's the question. So if I have my Bengals players, I'm probably not panicking. I think the game's going to be a good game. Otherwise, the Bengals are going to make it as messy and dirty and ugly as possible, just like the Giants did last night. and at this point, I might be leaning towards actually wanting a healthy Jake Browning to take over the offense than an injured Joe Burrow, and I'm kind of hoping that the Bengals kind of see it that way, because there's no point on like throwing the season away after week 2. We don't know what the pattern is going to be. Are the Bengals one of those teams that we projected to be good that are actually bad, or and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is now to get that win, or are they going to gamble or not gamble and just play it safe and see how it goes? Because the Rams, on the other hand, the Rams start the season 2-1. They're one of those teams that we thought were going to be bad are actually good, and the direction of everything. Are we like happy to start Rams players like a Kyron Williams and a Puka Nacua, and we got to start selling low on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Joe Mixon? Like, those are the questions that are going to go into Monday night. Like I said, I from a fantasy perspective, I kind of still think it's probably better that Browning starts, and it might still be a shootout. Like, who knows what these teams are? We're only kind of guessing. So to move forward after all that, like I brought this up before, like these are the NFL betting lines for the games. I tend not to use these. Well, that's not true. I tend to use these from a perspective of when I pick up my kickers on Friday nights or Saturdays. I can just kind of go to the games that have like the highest implied total and pick up a kicker if that guy's available in the game. Because if there's a lot of points, that means the kickers are going to have a lot of opportunities. You really can't guess if the kicker is going to kick a lot of extra points or a lot of field goals. Like the kicker that wins the week is usually the guy that kicks like 5 field goals, and you can't really predict that as easily as just the guy having a lot of opportunities to kick in games that are high scoring. So Chargers, Vikings kicker, those are the guys that you want to be putting in there. 54 implied points by Vegas. If you're wondering how good Vegas is at their job, because they have to kind of tend to be good at their job, they implied that there was going to be 43.5 points for the Giants 49ers, and there were 42 points in that game. So guys got to be pretty good at their job to do their job. So I've already talked about Burrow. He may play and be limited. There's other issues probably going on with the Bengals offense, so it's just not an issue of Joe Burrow. Jake Browning, if he plays, I don't think you necessarily need to be scared. There's no guarantee that he's going to be good, but like, I've liked the kid in the past, forever that's worth. Other things on Friday, like these are where we're kind of making the decision. Well, I shouldn't say we, you should use my I words that these are when I'm making my determination on my stashes. I had to drop Tajay Spears in one league because Henry's healthy, and I'm wheels up on Kendre Miller at this point. So Henry, like I said, Henry's good. He's going to play, no injury designation. Eckler's out, so Kelly is probably usable this week. David Montgomery's actually listed as doubtful. The only guy I'm not going to go Craig Reynolds. I'm probably going to go Jamar Gibbs if I'm curious. So Boston Scott's still limited in the concussion protocol, I guess. I would feel comfortable playing DeAndre Swift. Like, we're going to get into roster construction stuff, but like, this is where the flex spot really works out, because the flex spot really doesn't hurt you, provided that your number 1, number 2s for running back, wide receiver are solid, and even your tight end, and then you could just have fun with that position. If there's a guy that you're playing in another spot that's like boom bust, then I tend to like to have that guy be safe. And at a certain point, like, even though upside is what you're playing for, because it's all about risk to, if you're not first, you're last. The end of the day is like, you still have to have a certain amount of built-in floor to your team. Otherwise, you're going to just get like trounced, 50 to 90 by your opponent. So anyway, Zay Jones is out, so that kind of upticks all of the Jaguars receivers. Solomon Ahmed's doubtful, so like, if you're still an A-chain truther, like I'm not, I think that the road, if there was an opportunity, it's already passed, because like Jeff Wilson's coming back, and they're probably, I would guess that there's going to probably be some shenanigans and chicanery with the backfield in Miami down the line. So Waddle's questionable. Maybe Durham Smythe is a thing. Maybe A-Chain gets a little bit more work because if Waddle misses, That's interesting. I know there's probably a lot of people out there that have like Waddle as either their number one or like a high end two. Tony's questionable in KC, which is also interesting because Richie James has been ruled out. So now there's a possibility that the target distribution for the Chiefs is going to be narrower. So guys like Sky Moore are a little bit more appealing. Pacheco's questionable. Jamal Williams has been ruled out. Again, Kendra Miller wheels up. Tony Jones, if you need, like, I don't know if I trust Tony Jones. I would probably, like, again, Kendra Miller being a flex play this week with that high upside that he just takes over everything is intriguing to me. Gus Bus is wheels up because Justice Hill's out. I don't know if they're going to activate anybody off the practice squad like Kendry or Kenyon Drake, but like Gus Bus is really efficient guy, and it wouldn't surprise me, at least for 1 week, that they just go like, hey, it's your job, Gus. He's trustable. Odell's out, so that target funnel again for the Ravens, like Zay Flowers. I don't know if Rashad Bateman's a thing, but like, like you're just getting like those target funnels are always nice. So like now, whether or not Zay Flowers was going to be like a thing, well, like there's one less guy to take targets away from him. So like, he's probably well within the range of being a wide receiver 2, because he's going to be competing behind Mark Andrews. Let's see, Hopkins, DeAndre Hopkins is going to travel with the Titans. Whether or not he's healthy, I don't think matters. But like again, the target funnel, like even an unhealthy Hopkins helps Traylon Burks and Chig, because there's just going to be less targets. He's going to be less effective in my mind, which means that like the ball's probably, he's going to be out there as a decoy. They're basically go, hey, if you want to try and win the game with Hopkins, and he's a limited skill set, like short area contested catch type guy. The upside with Chig and Traylon Burks is intriguing to me. Christian Watson and Aaron Jones are questionable. That offense in Green Bay is interesting. May downgrade Luke. When we're looking for patterns, this may upgrade or downgrade Luke Musgrave. I mean, if Christian Watson's taking the top off of defense, it could make the targets to Musgrave more appealing. Or it just could take targets away from him. So those are things that like I would be looking at. So I don't know if he plays it, like it's a coin flip. Would I play him? Depending on if that's the guy that I have to have based off my league. But Musgrave, everything is saying Musgrave's going to eventually have that spike week, and when it happens, and if he's on your bench, then who knows when it's going to happen again. Okay, we're looking for patterns. So Cam Akers is likely to not play. Dawson Knox is listed, isn't listed on the injury report for the Bills. And I thought this is interesting because this probably helps Kincaid's ability to have a spike week. And you go, hey, well, why if Dawson Knox? Because Galton Kincaid is not going to play the Dawson Knox blocking type role. He's that slot F position, H position type tight end, the quote unquote move guy. And if Dawson Knox was out, it wouldn't necessarily mean that like Kincaid's going to be used more in that regard, because the skill sets are different. So when we get to the 49ers Giants game, is like, why would you have your receiving tight end blocking? Why would you do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It would be more likely to me that like you do something else. So like forcing Dalton Kincaid into the Dawson Knox role does not necessarily help Kincaid out, if that's how the Bills were going to use him. So having Dawson Knox be healthy means that like they can keep Kincaid is that third wide receiver. That's why he has potential fantasy value. As I already started, like Gardner Minshew's wheels up. This probably maybe helps Pittman this week and Moss, because they're going to have more of a traditional offense and not run everything through Anthony Richardson's legs and arm. So that's probably a good thing for Colts. And Gardner Minshew is, don't forget that before the 49ers drafted or went out and got Trey Lance, that they were just going to bring Gardner Minshew in. Like, Gardner Minshew is probably the best backup quarterback in the league. He's probably better than like half the starting quarterbacks in the league. So like, that's a benefit if you're worried about that. Cordell Patterson, this is interesting. He's questionable. he was trending up. Now he's not. Like, the reason why Cordell Patterson is interesting is because how much he's going to not just cut into the work of Bijan and Algier. I'm less worried about that. It's how he's going to be utilized and how he's going to unlock both those guys. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on if he does actually play. He may end up just being the receiving guy out there. The Browns said Kareem Hunt's going to play. That's interesting because now we get to see how Jerome Ford's going to be utilized. Again, he's probably going to be in that like 70% snap share, 70% workload. That's what I would like to see out of him. And then the efficiency obviously to go along with it. I think Kareem Hunt is kind of dust, but like whatever, it's not up to me. And then Andy Dalton's the start, so the Red Rifle can kind of be a turnover machine at certain points. I would not be playing the Panthers, but I think Bryce Young is a better quarterback than Andy Dalton is. So, the Seahawks are an interesting streaming option. And that's one of the other things that I kind of will tend to look at, like the Vegas odds in games. Like, you don't need to tell me the Patriots and the Jets are the lowest projected points. And the Patriots and the Jets are probably owned in all leagues. But like, if we see some of those type games, those are good ones to kind of bet on about who's a good streaming option. Let's see. I already talked about Vegas odds and fantasy. And like I said, I tend to think that how they project some of their games is based off of not what you and I think. They're trying to get people to bet on their lines, and how some of the games actually will shake out. They want people to actually take the bets, because otherwise, like, how do they make their money? So that's why I say, like, sometimes I kind of don't look at those things, but I will kind of look at why they want why they have things set up the way that they are, because they're not going to be bad at their jobs. Let's see. The Hail Mary, like the shootout games that we're going to have going on, like the Chargers Vikings, like if you have a Jordan Addison, he's a fine flex play to me. Like, I think I have him in my lineup because you're just trying to get pieces of those offenses. Someone's going to score, so it makes if the Rams and the Bengals were a shootout, it makes Tyler Boyd jump into the flex consideration, because like 70 yards and a touchdown, vaults him into top 24 contention in the week. Other guys that we would be looking at, I think the Chargers play, or Gerald Everett if he's available. Josh Palmer has appeal if you're in deeper leagues and you're kind of hurting at wide receiver at this point. Like, those are the guys that we would be looking at, because it's just like, hey, those are the guys that in a 300 or 400 yard passing game can really pop, because the target funnel, their other teams are taking away the better targets, and then those targets have to go someplace. So moving on. So in certain games, I have this brought up because of the Texans Jaguars, and in the case of the Texans Jaguars, there's an 8-point spread between the two. So the Texans are 8-point underdogs. I don't always play into the garbage time narrative, and I'll explain why. Because if a team's down, they're not doing well. So even if the other team is just trying to play that quote unquote prevent defense, like, we want efficiency. That means touchdowns. That means the team hasn't been scoring up until that point. They haven't been moving the football, because if they were, they wouldn't be in garbage time to begin with. So we don't always get the 49ers Giants fourth quarter where the guys end up jumping out and making their stat lines a lot better in the fourth quarter. That's asking for a lot even in garbage time. So if a team's usually not good, they're probably not going to be good for 4 quarters. So those garbage time narratives. The interesting thing about the Texans Jaguars game is I kind of tend to think it's going to be closer than they're making it out to be, because I don't think the Jaguars are necessarily as good, and I don't think the Houston is going to be as bad, because I think there's already improvement with CJ Stroud. And again, this is from what I saw in the preseason till now, that he may actually be good at football. And that was a question that I had from him coming out of Ohio State, is if he's just a product of a system, because a lot of the younger guys, like they're basically just reading the pre-snap reads and they're throwing to grass, and they're not processing stuff post-snap. And they can get into a problem as they move up the food chain because teams will be disguising their coverages and their roles, and they want you to do stuff like that to throw to green grass because then there's going to be a guy there as they're screwing around with some of this stuff. So moving on, like for a game like that, like if the Jaguars aren't exactly what we think they are, then that becomes quote unquote like your trap game, and the Texans can even keep it closer than it's expected, or they can actually do the opposite and blow the Jaguars out. So like, Nico Collins, if he wasn't already a start, like he's a start to me in a game like that. And if you don't trust Nico Collins at this point, like why is he around? Like someone else probably values him more than you do. And then the last thing of all this, I did my waxing philosophical video last night. Never trust Thursday Night Football. I know some of the people have pointed out that they kind of like how I look at the games, and the Giants made it ugly for as long as they could make it ugly. Sorry, the audio just popped on from ESPN. The Giants tried to make it as ugly as possible. They weren't trying to win the game. That was part of their problem. And eventually, because they didn't have the firepower to hang with the 49ers, they just lost. So I watched them use a converted wide receiver to tight end, Darren Waller, as a blocking tight end for most of the game. And you could actually see that he has very little understanding of how to block in the passing game. And he's basically just trying to get in guys' way. And that's really odd because, like, at the very least, if you're using Darren Waller as a decoy in the passing game, it's going to open up routes for other guys. They weren't doing that. Daniel Jones is probably not going to be a thing this year. He's still struggling with the deep ball. His deep ball accuracy, which is a knock when he was coming out of Duke. So like, I just don't know how much he's going to be a thing going on in the future. The overall offense, if they start becoming more matchup dependent in order to get those good matchups, and you might be thinking, well, they didn't have Saquon, and at this point, it shouldn't matter. I think the Giants are well coached. Don't get me wrong, but like, if they're relying on Saquon to do certain things, the limitations of Daniel Jones are always going to be on display against teams that can take it away. So then it becomes matchup dependent. And again, we talk about Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell's. It still probably has a little bit of ability out of the slot, even though he's limited. Wan'Dale Robinson, another slot guy, limited. Like, if they're playing off coverage because of reasons, and Isaiah Hodgins only had like one target. I mean, this guy should just be running like nines all game long to keep the defense honest, but they weren't doing that because Daniel Jones can't complete the deep ball. And then where's the other guy? I don't even see him. Where's Hodgins? It just becomes hard to win when you're not attempting to scheme your way out of a brown paper bag. And that's what the Giants weren't doing. They weren't putting pressure on the 49ers. They were doing the opposite and trying to hang in a game long enough for the 49ers to make a mistake. And they couldn't get that mistake because Brock Purdy's pretty good. I only saw like he made like one really bad mistake in the game, and they couldn't capitalize on that either. And then you have like Christian McCaffrey, doing Christian McCaffrey things. Should have had a touchdown on a wheel route. The linebacker for the Giants, where is he at? Is it McFadden? I think the 41. Yeah, he's really good at football. I was really shocked at that. I didn't know that much about him, but he's really good at football. I actually watched the game. I put a little effort out. So anyway, those are just the general thoughts going on with all that stuff. And the offensive tackle for the 49ers should have been thrown out of the game. Trent Williams. That was pretty bad. That just goes to show the NFL is a business and it's not a sport. So anyway, that's about all I got for today. Maybe I'll come up with something tomorrow. Maybe I won't. Who knows?